Field reports from the strange. This is Obscura Bureau.
The first officer's hand trembled violently as he pointed to the cockpit windshield, his knuckles white against the instrument panel's ghostly green glow. A metallic, coppery scent filled the pressurized cabin air, the unmistakable smell of ozone and something else, something organic and wrong. Outside, the storm clouds weren't clouds at all, but something that moved with purpose, coiling around the wing like sentient smoke. Every instrument on the panel began flickering erratically, needles dancing to a rhythm no human could comprehend. Then came the whispering. Not through the headsets, but directly inside their skulls. 1,000 voices speaking in languages that shouldn't exist. The air grew thick and resistant, like swimming through chilled syrup, as the plane began descending not toward Miami, but into something far more ancient. Passengers began waking not to turbulence, but to the sensation of cold, damp fingers tracing patterns on the backs of their necks. And in that moment, both pilots knew with absolute certainty they weren't landing in an airport, but being pulled into a place that had been waiting for them. The local time the date is March 14, 1992. The air inside the cabin carried a faint, metallic tang, like ozone after a storm. A sticky, unnatural chill seeped through the fuselage, clinging to the skin. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened. The screen fades up on a grainy, black and white security feed. It shows a vintage Boeing 727, its livery strangely faded, rolling to a silent stop on a deserted runway. The engine's roar cuts to absolute silence, leaving only the faint, metallic scent of ozone hanging in the air. What if everything you knew about time was wrong? What if a fragment of the past could simply fall from the sky? Flight 417 from London to Miami touched down perfectly on schedule, except it arrived 37 years late. The air on the tarmac carried the faint, metallic scent of ozone, and the cold, damp chill of a forgotten era. And the people who disembarked from that aircraft, they hadn't aged a single bit. A metallic scent, like old coins and ozone, clung to the air around them. Their clothes were crisp and clean, yet felt stiff and cold to the touch, untouched by decades. The only sound was the faint, dry rustle of their movements, a whisper against a silence that felt solid and heavy. A Pan Am poster, a ticket stub, London, 1985. For software engineer Michael Reed, this was the trip of a lifetime. A promotion at the new office in Miami. It was meant to be their fresh start. Mark, his wife Sarah, and their 6-year-old daughter Lily. Everything captured on his bulky camcorder. Lily's excited chatter filled the tape. Sarah's nervous smile a flicker as they boarded Pan Atlantic Airways Flight 417. Then, the footage cuts. The screen fills with a stark, official graphic. Flight 417 vanishes over the Atlantic. No debris, no Mayday. The flights simply vanished. No distress call ever crackled through the static. No wreckage was ever found to tell its final story. The Atlantic Ocean seemed to yawn wide and consume them without a trace. Investigators would later file it under catastrophic mechanical failure, a sterile clinical term for the families left behind. That report offered no closure, only a permanent, haunting void. Their story ended not with a period, but with a question mark that never faded, lingering like the scent of ozone before a storm. March 14, 2029, Miami International. For Senior Controller Jenna, the graveyard shift was just another quiet night. The air in the tower held the sterile scent of ozone and cold electronics. Her fingers, calloused from years at the console, tapped a steady, absent rhythm on the desk. Outside, the only sound was the distant, mechanical whisper of the airport sleeping. Then, on the radar screen, where nothing should have been, a solitary blip materialized. The air in the tower grew thick with the scent of ozone and cold coffee. Jenna's fingers tightened on her headset mic, her voice a controlled, professional calm belying the sudden weight in her chest. Unidentified aircraft on approach vector 29er. This is Miami Tower. You are not on our schedule. Please identify. On the radar screen, a solid blip held steady. No transponder code, just a silent, unwavering presence. Static crackle. Then a tinny, professional voice cut through. Miami Tower. This is Pan Atlantic 417. The final word, heavy, hung in the air. A single syllable that thickened the atmosphere with unspoken dread. In the tower, the operator's breath hitched, the scent of ozone and cold metal sharpening as the unknown blip refused to fade. The pilot's voice crackled over the radio, strained and urgent, requesting clearance to land. We are low on fuel. Jenna, the air traffic controller, leaned forward in her chair, her brow furrowed in confusion. She muttered to herself, the words, barely audible, Pan Atlantic? A metallic scent, like ozone, filled the air as she scanned her monitors, finding no record of any flight under that name. Pan Atlantic went bankrupt in 91. 417. Confirm your airline. I show no active flight plan on file. The metallic scent of ozone filled the tower as static crackled through his headset. Negative, tower. A primal dread took hold as the cold plastic of his headset seemed to cling to his skin. We are Pan Atlantic Flight 417, London to Miami. Estimated arrival, 2350. Over. The air in the cockpit grew heavy with ozone. A low, metallic groan vibrated through the fuselage. Then, a voice crackled back, sharp and wrong. Your estimated arrival was... She checked the database, and her blood ran cold. The record was 37 years old. The 727 sat on the tarmac, surrounded at a distance by silent, flashing emergency vehicles. Its flawless, outdated form radiated a profound and unnatural stillness. The cabin windows were dark voids, swallowing all light. This plane was a ghost, a museum relic that had somehow fallen from the sky. The fuel in its tanks was an obsolete formula, long abandoned by modern aviation. Newspapers in the cockpit bore the date March 14, 1985, their pages brittle with age. The cabin door groaned open, spilling a wedge of dim interior light onto the tarmac. Airstairs were pushed forward with a metallic shriek, connecting the fuselage to the ground. Against the blinding glare of the floodlights, silhouetted figures began to emerge. They moved with a strange, deliberate calm, blinking slowly as if waking from a deep, unsettling sleep. The men's wide-lapel suits were sharply tailored, yet they hung unnaturally still in the stale air. Beside them, women with towering hair stood rigid, their elaborate styles casting long, distorted shadows on the wall. In the center, a small child clutched a worn ET plush, its fabric stained and one eye missing. The only sound was the faint, sticky rustle of the child's fingers against the toy's matted fur. Their clothes, their luggage, their very faces, all frozen in mid-80s amber. The air in the makeshift quarantine hangar was thick with the scent of ozone and old leather. Not a day older, they stood like mannequins, their stillness more unsettling than any decay. A damp chill clung to the space, broken only by the faint hum of distant generators. Passengers sat huddled on folding chairs, their bodies cocooned in metallic foil blankets that rustled with every tremor. The sharp scent of ozone and sterile plastic hung thick as officials in bulky hazmat suits moved silently among them. Michael Reed, 35, stared blankly at a tablet screen where Dr. Archer, a psychologist, conducted his interview through layers of protective protocol. Every whispered question from the doctor seemed to tighten the cold, damp air in the room. Archer's voice cut through the static, sharp and demanding. Michael, what's the last thing you remember before we landed? Michael's reply was hesitant, his voice thick with confusion. Turbulence, he managed, the words sticking in his throat. Just a patch of bad turbulence, he continued, his gaze distant, as if searching the empty air for memory. Over the water, the statement hung there, incomplete. The metallic scent of ozone and salt clung to the air, a ghost of the event he couldn't fully recall. The seatbelt sign flickered to life, casting a sickly amber glow through the cabin. Lily's breath hitched beside me, her fingers tightening in a cold, desperate grip. I could smell the sharp tang of ozone and stale fear hanging in the recycled air. Then, with an unnatural hush, the turbulence ceased, leaving only a profound, watchful stillness. The captain announced our imminent landing, roughly an hour ago. A metallic, coppery scent now hangs thick in the recycled air. My fingers trace the cold, damp condensation beating on the window. From somewhere deep in the fuselage, a low, rhythmic scratching begins. Archer. And you feel no different? Michael. Just tired. Archer. Nothing else? No. Unusual sensations? Michael. A long flight. That's all. I need to call my boss. Let him know we've arrived. He's meeting us at the gate. She stared, unblinking, at the monitor. On it, a man in his 70s, her brother, was begging to see her. The air in the room grew thick, carrying the faint, metallic scent of ozone from old electronics. But the world had moved on without them. Their loved ones had aged or vanished entirely. Their careers, residences, and finances belonged to a life now severed. Investigators found no leads, their case files growing thick with confusion. Medical examinations revealed nothing. Their bodies were unnervingly, perfectly healthy. Everything seemed perfectly, unnervingly normal. And yet, the air in the room grew heavy and still, thick with the faint metallic scent of old batteries. A soft, almost imperceptible hum began to emanate from the toy, vibrating through the floorboards. Then, the faintest whisper of static crackled from its speaker, a sound that didn't belong in the quiet night. The air grew heavy with a scent of ozone and freshly baked bread. A bizarre, unsettling combination that didn't belong here. The food wasn't just preserved. It was impossibly fresh, as if prepared mere hours ago, steaming faintly in the cool cabin air. Each detail whispered that time had stopped or twisted here, leaving everything suspended in a state of eerie perfection. This small, mundane discovery coiled in the gut, hinting at a reality far more terrifying than simple decay. Every single watch had frozen at precisely 11:03 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, their silent faces bearing witness to that impossible moment. The passengers aboard Flight 418 hadn't experienced a single dream since the unexplained turbulence rocked the aircraft. A metallic scent, like ozone after a lightning strike, lingered in the recycled cabin air. Michael accepted the tablet, his fingers leaving damp prints on the cold glass as he prepared to search for answers. In the dead of night, he begins his grim search, typing his own name into search bars. Obituaries flickered across the screen, each one a chilling possibility he never lived to see. He scrolls through memorial pages, the air thick with the scent of digital decay and forgotten grief. Then it appears. His own face, artificially aged in a photoshopped image, staring back with hollow, knowing eyes. Michael's shoulders shook with silent sobs as the psychological pressure became unbearable. But a deeper, more insidious horror was beginning to form in his mind. Michael had always been meticulous, so he reviewed the camcorder footage from the plane. The grainy images carried a metallic scent of ozone and the faint sound of static whispers. The grainy home video shows Lily smiling in her seat, while Sarah sleeps soundly beside her. Then, with a sudden jerk, the camera swings toward the window. Outside, the world is a smear of shadow and fleeting light. For a moment, the glass seems to hold a reflection that doesn't belong. Outside, the darkness wasn't sky black, but an absolute, swallowing void. For a single, suspended frame, something pressed against the glass from the other side. The air inside the room grew thick and cold, carrying a faint, metallic tang like old copper. A low, wet, scratching sound whispered from the point of contact. Every muscle locked. A primal, formless dread anchored him in place, his breath catching in his throat. The pressure on the pane was undeniable, solid, patient, and utterly wrong. Then, as quickly as it came, the pressure vanished. The glass was just glass again, but the unnatural silence that followed was heavier than the dark. A pale, shapeless form flickered into existence, then vanished. An impossible shape where no shape should be. Then he remembered another detail, a sound beneath the turbulence. Not engine noise, but a whispering static that seemed to breathe. The voices returned, a collective whisper bleeding from the walls in his isolation room's stillness. He heard it again now, a faint susurration that seemed to permeate the very air. A metallic tang of ozone and decay clung to the cold, damp atmosphere. Michael slipped from his room into the silent, watchful dark of the hallway. He navigated the sterile hangar corridors, pulled toward the secured area where the plane was stored. He discovered a service door slightly ajar, its metal edge gleaming under the emergency lighting. He had to return. The truth was waiting inside that aircraft. Stepping inside, the air carried the scent of stale ozone and cold metal. Everything remained exactly as they'd abandoned it, but cold. A deep, marrow-chilling cold that seeped into his very bones. The air grew heavy with the scent of old wood and something faintly metallic, and in the darkened cabin, his gaze fell upon them. The other passengers sat motionless, their stillness more terrifying than any movement. They sat motionless in their seats, eyes fixed ahead with identical, vacant smiles. The air smelled faintly of ozone and decay, thick enough to taste. Michael's breath hitched as he registered the complete, unnatural silence. He whispered, "Sarah?" Into the heavy stillness. "Lily? Sarah?" Their heads pivoted in eerie unison at the back of the plane. Their smiles mirrored the others. Hollow, vacant, utterly wrong. 100 whispers merged into one flat, mechanical chorus. Lily's voice, indistinguishable from Sarah's, cut through the metallic hum of the cabin. "Daddy, we're almost home," it stated, devoid of inflection. Sarah's identical tone followed. "The turbulence is over. We passed through." Michael's eyes widened in disbelief. Beyond the glass wasn't the familiar hangar bay. It was the same impossible, starless emptiness he'd captured on tape. The realization hit him like a physical blow. They were no longer in the hangar. Michael stumbled backward up the aisle, his retreat met by the synchronized rotation of every passenger's head. Their grins remained frozen, carved into place like porcelain masks. A whispering chorus swelled, filling the cabin with the sticky scent of ozone and decay. It was a cacophony of familiar voices. His own, Sarah's, Lily's, all repeating in chilling unison, "Almost home." Michael's scream tore through the cabin, raw and primal. "Where are we?" "Huh," he choked out, the words catching in his throat. His final question, "What are you?" "Whew," was barely a whisper, swallowed by the sudden metallic scent of ozone. Then, with a soundless swing, the door opened fully, revealing not a flight deck, but an impossibly long, lightless corridor stretching into oblivion. The captain stood silhouetted in the doorway, his form a dark outline against the emergency lights. He spoke, but the voice that emerged was a layered, distorted chorus of every passenger aboard. "Captain, we are the echo, Michael. The reflection left behind when the real Flight 417 fell. We are the story that didn't end, and we needed a new ending. We needed witnesses to pull us back from the edge." The air grew thick with the scent of ozone and old rot, a palpable dread clinging to the skin. A low, wet scratching sound began from just beyond the frame, methodical and deliberate. This was the only way to conclude it, to bring us back. The heavy service door slammed shut with finality, leaving only the hollow hum of the empty hangar. The next morning, Michael Reed lay unconscious on the cold concrete 50 yards from that same locked door. The plane had vanished completely. Not a trace of the 127 souls aboard remained. For the second time, the aircraft and everyone inside had simply ceased to exist. No records of their removal exist. News headlines flash across the screen. "Mystery of the lost flight deepens. Government closes investigation." We cut to Michael, now older and grayer, sitting in a modest living room. The air feels stale, heavy with memory. His voice is quiet, haunted. They tell me it was mass hysteria, a shared hallucination from trauma. They show me files that say the hangar was empty all along. He stares into the distance, a metallic taste of ozone, and lies in the air. The interviewer's voice echoes from somewhere beyond the frame, challenging. Quote, "But you don't believe that?" Older Michael's response comes slowly, each word weighted with decades of dread. "I have the camcorder, the tape." He pauses, the air thickening with the scent of dust and old plastic. "I watch it sometimes." His confession hangs in the heavy silence, broken only by the distant sound of dripping water. A darkness deeper than night presses against the window pane. A silhouette, impossible, long shifts within the gloom. A scent like ozone and damp earth seeps through the glass, and from the void, a susurrus of whispers, too faint to understand, crawls into the room. They never intended to return to 1985. They sought to arrive here, in the present moment, our nostalgia, our deepest yearnings. They became the mortar for their bridge into now. They aren't from the past. They're something else entirely. The camera holds tight on Michael's weathered face, his eyes fixed on something beyond the frame. His voice drops to a gravelly whisper, carrying the weight of terrible knowledge. "They're from the in-between," he murmurs, the words hanging in the stagnant air. A long pause follows, filled only by the faint scent of ozone and distant scratching from the walls. "And I think they succeeded," he finally whispers, his throat tightening. "They're here." They blend in seamlessly, learning our patterns and routines. You might work alongside one, sharing coffee and casual conversation. You could live next door to one, separated only by a thin wall. Their presence is a quiet rot in the ordinary air, a sticky dread that clings. How could you ever know until a faint, static whisper seeps through the dead of night? Or you notice a smile held just a fraction too long, a fraction too still. The air in the room grew thick, tasting of ozone and stale dust. Then, the screen cut to the original security footage. The loop began to play. Then, the footage glitches. For a single frame, the faces at the cabin windows are visible. They are all turned, not looking out at the runway, but into the cabin, toward the cockpit. Their expressions are not of confusion, but of serene, terrifying anticipation. The question isn't where Flight 417 went, but the real question is, what did it bring with it? The next time you're on a plane, during a moment of quiet turbulence, don't listen to the engines. Listen to the silence between them. Listen to the silence between the noises. What do you hear? Is it just your imagination, or is it an echo, waiting to land?
If the report helped, subscribe and open the next case.